So there was because I do want to talk a little bit about the stuff that because we kind of had a bit of a public feud. No, like, and I don't care about like feelings and stuff, but I want to talk about the issues. But I will say this, right? So when I did the Douglas Murray debate, I had always I've been doing big shows for a few years now, and I'm always taking the controversial issue of whatever the current thing is. And it's not because I just want to be a contrarian. Like, I don't know. It's just always wrong. And it's always so like when it was the COVID lockdowns, I was against that. When it was the vaccine, I was against that. When it was the Ukraine war, I was against that. And I would go on like Rogan's show right when it's a white hot issue and be making the case against it. And so I'd get a lot of like pushback, but I was kind of like used to the level. But then after the Douglas Murray one, I mean, I really rose up on Israel's most wanted list, and I was swarmed and in what seemed to be kind of coordinated, but I don't know. But there just all of a sudden like my Twitter experience changed, and it's everybody with everyone with Hebrew letters in their name is furious at me and all this. And I had never really been like, I had never quite had that before. I'd never quite had like a mob after me like that. Mm-hmm. And here we are. This is happening. It's this year. I'm 42. I was under no real concern. Like at this point, it's like the censorship regime seems to have been rolled back. Joe Rogan's got my back. Tucker Carlson has my back. I'm kind of fine. Like I never actually thought Douglas Murray was going to get me canceled, Mm-hmm. So like I'm fine. I'm 42. I got a great job. I'm making really good money. I got a hot wife. I got beautiful kids, and I'm Jewish. I'm as inoculated against like falling into this as you could be. And I will tell you, man, like there were moments where I just found myself be like fucking like, dude, it's like by the time you're having the most disingenuous, annoying fucking like rabbi, like just and doing like the dumbest thing ever, they attack you, and then if you defend yourself, they go, he doth protest too much. You're like, fuck you. And it almost feels in a way like it almost seems like that's the point of their existence.
Yes.
Like it almost seems like Rabbi Shmuley, you're like, what fucking character from Adolf Hitler's play did you spring to life in and like become? And so if I'm going to be completely honest, it's like, I see that, and then I go, well, let me try to put myself in the perspective of like when you were talking, it really hit home with me when you were talking to Patrick Bet-David about Ben Shapiro quote tweeting you and like how fucked up that is, mm-hmm. dude, to like go after someone and say you're so young at the time. And like so like I understand like getting pushed to the level of like, fuck the Jews. Like I get it. And I understand why I've seen lots of people get like pushed to that. And I would also say in addition to that, one of the things that's been kind of interesting to me is that there's been one of the parts of the campaign against me since then, which Douglas Murray himself penned in an op-ed for the New York Post, and every Ziobot or Zionist account on Twitter has said, is that I'm not really Jewish. Douglas Murray said in his article, he goes, Dave Smith claims some Jewish ancestry, which is just like so bizarre. And then a bunch of these people are like, they're like, well, he had one Jewish grandfather, but that doesn't count because his mother wasn't Jewish, so he's not a Jew, which is like the weirdest goddamn thing. And okay, so I'm starting this conversation with two pretty big concessions, but I mean both of them. And I will say that did kind of open my eyes a little bit to go like, well, look, why is it that they want to take that away from me? Like, why is it that they must first remove that, or at least attempt to remove that? And that is because there is a layer of added protection that you get. There is, and look, part of this is natural. It is tougher to convince people that a black guy hates black people. Now, you could be a black guy who hates black people, but it's just like a lot less likely. Yes. We all kind of giggle at, what's his name out in California, the blackface of white supremacy type shit. But I certainly would at least concede that there is at least a layer of protection to being a Jewish guy who criticizes Israel, and that's bullshit. Like, that's bullshit. It shouldn't be like that. Any American, I was even going to say any American taxpayer, but that's stupid too. Any American. It doesn't even matter if you're a net tax drug. You have freedom of speech, and you can say what you want to, and you can have opinions about a foreign government. You can have opinions about a people. Like, you have the right to have that. And so I will concede, number one, I understand where there's a tendency to like kind of blame Jews. I also understand that there's an unfair degree of protection that you get. However, I think you were also very unfair in the way you came at me and saying that the only reason I'm on these shows is because I'm a Jew or something. I mean, it seemed to me, and again, I say this, like, I like you. I've always liked you. I say this, it seemed insane to come at me over that. Is it like your issue you said on Candace was that I didn't deny the Holocaust or something, or that I wasn't willing to question World War II, which I've been pretty famous for defending the biggest questioner of World War II. I think 40% of my interviews are just asking me about Daryl Cooper. And so I guess that I just wonder, like, what was it that you were trying to, like, what was the beef? What was the disagreement?
Well, the beef started, and it was about a year ago, so I don't remember it exactly. But the beef started that, of course, the thing that is happening is that everybody's now permitted to talk about Israel and the Jews. And everybody also knows that, and I know the world doesn't revolve around me, but I famously got, like, martyred for that, in a sense. And I'm not being dramatic. I mean, I lost PayPal, YouTube. I mean, they made it so that I could not have a career, and I couldn't make money, couldn't have a bank account, was part of that. On some level. I mean, that had a lot to do with January 6th, but I mean, being banned from PayPal is a pretty big deal, you know, and the rest of them, Venmo, like I can't get reimbursed if I buy a friend dinner or something like that. And got blacklisted from all the circles, CPAC, all the shows, Republican Party, whatever. And I recognize that it's not only my criticism of Israel, but the way that I do it. But of course, that's at the center of it, is that in principle, I'm against Jewish power, influence, the Israel lobby, etc. And I guess the biggest anxiety or insecurity about this, which I've talked about on my show, and we talked about a little bit earlier too, is this idea that now they're going to step in to kind of mediate this conversation. And in other words, they're going to try and draw a big red line that keeps me on the other side of it. And not just me. I would describe it, I'll give you a concession because I think you're being fair and you're being honest and I'm being honest. There's a big insecurity. And by insecurity, I don't mean like I'm not the prettiest girl at the ball. I mean insecurity in the sense of there is this mass awakening. This is a moment where we can really get these issues into the conversation, and someone like myself is in the Overton window, let's say. And not just that I can have a career, but my ideas can really take off. And the biggest concern when this was happening, and what it appeared to me to look like, is that you and a few other more elevated Israel critics were going to kind of slam the door shut behind. They were going to kind of bring you in. And the reason they would bring you in is because you're Jewish, and that's part of it.
Who was bringing me in, you think?
Like you were on Joe Rogan.
But I was on Rogan long before October 7th.
But to talk about this.
Yeah, but I was always talking about this shit on Rogan. I mean, like, look, I mean, I may have not been as focused on it because, fuck it, you know, this became the thing to be focused on. But all the stuff that I'm talking about and how involved Israel was, I was talking about, you know, before that. Like, Joe's a friend of mine. He's been having me on since 2016. I don't think he had me on because I was Jewish.
No, not that he brought you on like, hey, I need to invite a Jewish person, but it's like, let's be honest, you did the whole circuit. You did Tucker, Candace, Piers. I think you were on Tim Pool.
Oh,
Joe.
Yeah.
These are all shows I was banned from. And what was, you got to look at it from my perspective, maybe to see my state of mind.
Sure.
You know, last year when Candace got kicked out of Daily Wire, her live chat was lit up every day. Bring on Nick, and she was deliberately ignoring that and didn't want me on. Now, I was banned on YouTube, but I'm also more extreme. Now, same is true of like Tucker, all the Tim Pool, people have been trying to get me on his book.
No, I've seen it. Yeah.
Right. And so, and why am I not allowed on? Of course, it's my view that I was canceled for this issue. And so to see you go onto the show, you know, and people say it's jealousy. Maybe there's a little resentment there too, but it was a bigger concern that as a Jewish person, and also, by the way, not just that you're Jewish, but as a libertarian, you come at it from a different place. You're a non-interventionist, a Ron Paul guy. And I even have this disagreement with Tucker on some level too. So it's not just you. My big worry is the conversation going to stop at, we need to end all these wars and like the neocons are the problem? Because my critique goes further. And it says that it actually does have to do with Jewish identity. Jewish identity is so powerful and so potent. Jews refuse to assimilate. They're so powerful. They're so tribalistic. They're loyal to each other. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And that is actually where the Israel loyalty proceeds from. It's this anxiety. We need Israel because what happens if it goes south here? We need to be powerful in America to prevent a majority from rising up against us. And it's kind of that identity issue, which, and that's why I'm open to talking to you or even somebody like a Bill Ackman or a Sean McGuire or a Shapiro and say, I recognize Jews are a part of America. They always have been, and they're some of the finest Americans, actually. But people recognize it cannot go on this way where we have an open society, but they have this loyalty and kind of play by a different set of rules. And anyway, so my concern is that what it looked like to me is you're being brought onto the shows and they know maybe that you'll never go that far as a Jewish person, or maybe even as libertarian. And a big red line was being drawn and saying, but you are still an anti-Semite. You are still banned on YouTube. You are banned on the shows. Fuck you. You're all the way over here. And that's why I like you and I respect you and I think you're brilliant. And I didn't mean to attack you as a guy, although maybe I crossed the line here and there, but you did become a very central, and you recognize it, influential figure in this big conversation. And I looked at you maybe as like, whether you intended to or not, as a mediating force or a mitigating force in the conversation. That's where I came at it from.
Okay, so a couple things on that, because there's a lot there that's very interesting. So first of all, and I just tell you some information on this, right? So with Rogan, like, we're good friends. I've also been on the show a bunch of times. There, about half the time I've been on, he asks me to come on. About the other half, I ask to come on. I asked to come on the first time to talk about Israel. The last time I'd been on, it was all about Ukraine and all about, like whatever else the story of the day was. Mm-hmm. And he had a couple pro-Israel guys on, and I was just like, hey, Joe, can I come on and like break this shit down? Because I like know a lot about this. So I think it'll be an interesting fact. And he had me, and then, so it's just, with Rogan, it's just not true that there was any, with Tucker, me and Tucker became friends from, he reached out to me, got my number from Greg Gutfeld, I believe. And he reached out to me after I had been on and did a thing breaking down the war in Ukraine. And he goes, dude, I think this is the best concise breakdown of the war in Ukraine ever. And then we just started texting regularly. And he never had me on the Fox News show, but as soon as he was off, he wanted to talk. But again, if you go back and look at the Tucker thing, at least back then, like, because this was earlier in the, in the conflict, whatever you want to call it, I was the one who was bringing it up constantly. Mm-hmm. Like, he was dancing a little bit. Like, I think he was still at a thing like, I don't know if I want to go this close to the sun on this one. Whereas I was like, no, we are driving right to the sun, and that's where we're going. Candace, I mean, like, again, we're getting into like what's in people's heads. She had me on Daily Wire, which, listen, whatever beef I will never stop being grateful to Candace Owens for just having me on at the Daily Wire. I just know that makes Ben Shapiro so furious. And I love that so much. I think she did that partially for that reason. But she also, at least what she said was she loved my Ukraine breakdown and wanted to talk more about that. And I think also part of that was, and I'm pretty sure this is right, but I just think she was hearing a lot of this stuff for the first time from me. Like, she had just broken with Israel. And I think she had Norman Finkelstein on, but he had broken down like, the conflict with the Palestinians and the UN resolutions and stuff like that. But I was the one telling her about the clean break strategy and all this. And it was like new information to her, I believe. And so she was into that. And as far as like the other shows, Tim Pool, all the, like, I don't actually think it's correct that I was being brought on because I was Jewish. These were all relationships I had. I think I just wouldn't shut up about this issue. And honest, I don't think Tim Pool's trying to bring me on to talk about this, although not that he wouldn't.
Right.
But also, I would just say personally, which is, again, not the most important thing, but I understand you saying there's a lot of people that closed the door on you, but I'm not that guy. Mm-hmm. I'm the guy who had you on right after you got kicked off YouTube. And right. I also think like anyway, that was certainly not what I was going to do. Now, as far as the other stuff, which is a more interesting, broader conversation, I guess the counter to this would be that, as we were saying before with the racial racial hatred and things like that, it's like the other way to look at it is that, yes, I am criticizing Israel. I am criticizing the Israeli lobby, and I am criticizing the most, what I see as the most relevant faction of that, which was the neoconservatives. And I'm also very critical of the people supporting what Israel's doing. But you are correct in the sense that I'm not saying it's the Jews, which does certainly seem to be, racialism is like catnip, man. Like, it's like you saw it during wokeism and you see it during this iteration. I mean, people love going into that. But if I'm being completely honest, like, I don't think that's healthy for society. I don't wish to cross that line. And let me say it like this. Because I apologize if I'm rambling long.
No.
I'll let you speak uninterrupted.
I talk long too. So
yeah,
absolutely.
we're both long-winded. But so, all right. So Alex Jones, mutual friend of ours, you might be more friendly with him. I did a show once. He was very good to me, which I appreciated. And I don't bring this up to bash Alex Jones at all. I'm just making a point. I keep saying that, but I'm bashing people. Anyway, whatever. I guess I kind of am. But so Alex Jones, as you know well, had 100,000 conspiracies. I mean, so many of them didn't come true. You know, he gets a lot of credit for it, and some of them did. So to his credit, like some of them did. But I mean, he had theories that were like he was telling people that they were going to depopulate the earth for a while. He said it was all about one world government. He said it was all about I mean, like even as far as him pointing at which he would constantly point at the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, and you were like, that's not even where the action is anymore, dude. Like he totally missed the clean break and was over here chasing all this other stuff that had nothing. And like whatever, people get things wrong. It's fine. Now, they used Sandy Hook as the excuse to silence him, right? It was years after the Sandy Hook thing. He had a million conspiracies. But why did they use that one? Why did that one resonate with people? Well, the reason why they used that one, and the reason why even people who like Alex Jones may have like a little bit of a disgust impulse when they hear about that, is because that one was unique to all his other conspiracies. Because every other conspiracy, the bad guys were the ATF. The bad guys were the feds. The bad guys were, if you blame the ATF for something and you turn out to be wrong, like whatever, they deserve it anyway. It doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
But in this case, the target was people. It was just regular people, and regular people who had just lost their little children. It's like, geez, you can't miss on that one. And so I do think one of the things that concerns me with what you're doing, and I guess concerns me with the fact that I think you're winning in a lot of ways. And I don't, but I do worry about this disaster there, is that I do think so much of the energy you're harnessing does get pointed at just regular people. Like until the Jordan Peterson clip, when I first started realizing we were going to have to do this, I had kind of just been like, the reason I was like, I don't think I'll do another podcast with Nick was never because I didn't like you. I always liked you when we talked. I always thought the conversations were really interesting, as this one is. The thing was just, it's just like an incentives issue almost. We're like, well, I don't know, everyone on this side is going to lose their goddamn shit, and then I have to answer a million questions about that. But fuck them, so that's not enough to get me to stop doing it. But then half your audience is just going to call me a fucking Jew anyway. And so it's like, what's the point here? And I think that look, and I want to get into this more, but yeah, there are questions of Jewish identity. There are questions. Obviously, there's a relationship there. But the fact is that, look, the worst thing in my lifetime that Israel's done to the United States of America, I'm not sold on the 9/11 stuff. There's some questions there, but I think it's far from as conclusive. I think people are way out over their skis saying they know for a fact Israel did 9/11, but that's a topic for another day. But it was the war in Iraq. The war in Iraq is no question, and Coleman Hughes can try to argue with me about this, there's just no question that the neoconservatives and the Likud party and the whole Bush administration, this was pushed in a direction. It's not the only factor, but it is more than what made the difference. Like, the war does not happen without the neocons and without Netanyahu. It just doesn't. And yet at the same time, Jewish Americans were either the best or one of the best groups on that issue. Jews opposed the war in Iraq way ahead of the general public. And right-wing Christians were like the worst group on that. And so, but again, my target isn't them. My target isn't the people.
Right.
My target is like the people who propagandized them into believing that. And so if the thing is like, hey, I stopped short at actually naming the Jews, it's like, well, yeah. Because I don't think that's right. And I don't yes, there, and we can get into more of this, but no, Barry the dentist has nothing to do with any of this. And he, I think on some level, maybe I'm wrong, but I also don't think you're really trying to gin up hatred toward that guy. And so maybe that's why I stopped short of blaming the Jews. I think it's sloppier and not as accurate.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I think it's important just on a basic level to say that we don't agree on everything.
Sure.
We are distinct, and I wouldn't even say it's about further or closer. It's just that we are coming at it from different places. You believe it's the neocons, and it's in particular the War Party and Israel, and how those interact. And me, as an identitarian, I do look at the world through an identity-based lens, that you've got whites, blacks, Jews, and they all have political interest. They all identify as these groups. They group up based on them, and then those groups have conflicting interests. That's what politics has become, is like meeting out those interests. Like, is it in the interest of white people to go to war in Iraq? No. But for Jews, yes, because they have this connection to Israel. And same about all these other things. And so, even getting back to our beef, we could quibble about, I don't think that there's some conspiracy. I don't think they got together and said, let's invite Dave because, he's going to maintain censorship and Jewish control. Like, I don't believe that. But I do believe that you clearly take the more moderate position, or even I would say the more liberal position. As a libertarian, you're like a lowercase l liberal in the sense that you think that it's, like you said, it's not Jews in themselves or Jewish identity in itself. It is particular people in power, in particularly the state, that are doing these violent policies, whereas me, it is maybe a more radical rejection of liberalism. And I think that, maybe you're informed by your Jewish identity, or you're just ideologically believe that. It is a more moderate position, and they platform that because that's the version they want. That's the version that is safer for a Tim Pool or whoever. That's the version that the system is maybe comfortable with. That's what they might be willing to accept. And they don't want to take it to the place of the Jews for the reason, maybe for the good reason you described. And by the way, I'll give you another concession because I want to be objective. There are people that are legitimately hating Jews right now.
There are.
I saw in Florida, they're pulling up on Jews with like water pistols and spraying them with water. And I got on my show and I said, fuck that.
Yeah,
I said,
and I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I don't believe in that. I'm not a piece of shit. If I saw Ben Shapiro on the street, I saw him on the street and I said, hey man, why did you do a speech? You didn't say my name. I didn't run up and try and fight him.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in attacking.
They made it out like you did.
Yeah, right. Like I attacked his kids or something. Yeah. Human shields, right? But he picked up his kid when he walked across the street. It's like, okay, bro. but I don't believe in picking on random people. I'm not a cruel or hateful guy. And you do see that. And that video bothered me in particular because if people start to think it's okay to do that, the ADL isn't necessarily wrong about the idea that it is slippery slope. You pull up on somebody with a water pistol. Okay, what if it's a paintball gun next time? Is that really okay? That people are going to be harassed and like shot at with a airsoft gun or a paintball gun? No, that's bullshit. And that's denying basic dignity, basic rights. That's not Christian. That's not American. And there is an excess of that. And I agree that it should be sort of contained. But I think there's a fine line between that and saying that it is a bigger issue than the neocons because, when it comes to these influential Jews, like Larry Ellison, let's say, he's not religious, but he's tight with Netanyahu. Jeffrey Epstein was tight with the left in Israel. And to the extent that, you're right, Jews were the biggest critics of the Iraq war, in many cases, yeah, there's liberal Jews, but they're liberal because that's a strategy for Jews to succeed. They have these debates. What is best for the Jews? And like Brett Stevens at the New York Times, he mentored Bari Weiss. He says, Trump,
oh God, I hate him so much.
And he sucks, He's a neocon, case in point.
Yeah, I got in a big fight with him on Gutfeld's show years ago. He was such a smarmy prick. Anyway, whatever.
Major douche.
Oh God, it's the worst, the worst.
Yeah, but he says in 16 or 17, he goes, Trump is bad for the Jews because he is opposing the liberal values that have been so good to us as Jews. And it's like that sort of encapsulates when, like the ADL, for example, gets criticized. They say, well, the ADL's making Jews look bad. Or they're going after people like Shapiro and protecting people like Ilhan Omar. In other words, they're attacking Jewish Zionists, but they're not hard enough on the progressive left. And what I see there is still a distilled Jewish self-interest, which is okay because we're all people and we're all advocating for the most for ourselves. But in America, we just need to do a better job of managing that. And I think that the Jewish community's out of control. Yeah. Is basically it.
Well, I would say, so kind of like in a similar sense to because me and you both we've both been accused of getting the call over the last few weeks, which turns out was just us calling each other and being like, I don't think there's any evidence that Israel did it. But like, so when you come out on your show and you go, look, guys, I'm not seeing any evidence that Israel was behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And then people go, oh, it looks like Nick got the call. You're like, okay, but like the much easier answer is that he just doesn't see any evidence that is right. And like people, it's like you're jumping to a conclusion. And I will say, I think you might be guilty of doing a little bit of that too. When you go like, well, look, they want the conversation controlled. It's like, or an easier answer might just be that like they've seen your hits. And they go, yeah, well, I don't want to bring a guy who's saying Hitler has aura on the show. Like, I'm open to, I do think what's horrible, what's happening to the Palestinians, but like, no, I don't think we need to go like that. So I think there's like probably, look, dude, you make your bed. You were, nobody I don't think that I know is denying that you were like horrendously mistreated when you were very young. But also since then, like there's an energy that you harness when you do that shit, and you know what you're doing with it, and that's not to say you're being disingenuous. I don't mean that at all. I just mean like you understand kind of like harnessing this radical energy of like, nah, dude, I'm staking out this position all the way over here. But it's a double-edged sword, and that also sometimes can turn a lot of people off. Although, look, you're moving the needle in a clear way, and so that is becoming more and more acceptable. I guess my point is that I don't know actually that it's possible to do that without having the excesses of the water gun thing, or perhaps much worse. I mean, look, as we've both figured out, man, I hate saying this out loud because it's against our interest, but a lot of people are kind of dumb, man, and a lot of people like can't really follow the nuance of all of that stuff.